I don't even know how I'm gonna edit this. I think I'm just gonna leave this as like a full-blown rant, to be honest. Like, I actually think that I will. I don't know how to edit this down because I feel so conflicted about this book. Hi there, my name is Vanessa. Welcome back to my channel. It is officially February 1st when I'm filming this, and I haven't done a December or a January wrap-up, so I thought I would combine them and talk about the books that I've read recently. 3 of the 6 books that I read in the month of December in particular, which was a busy month for me because I have family in California that I traveled to, so I didn't read as much. But 3 of those books were in Ember of the Ashes series, the first 3 of those. So I kind of want to talk about them all at the same time. And I've said this before, but I love this series. I especially really love the first one. It was very like survivalist horror almost, since our main character, Laya, who lives in this sort of like Roman Empire inspired village, is like a scholar, which is this very oppressed group of people who are mostly enslaved by the marshals, who are this sort of like this oppressor class in this empire. So there's like a emperor and everything like that, and it's a very militant kind of like totalitarian empire. She lives with her grandparents and her brother, and then her brother has some knowledge he's not supposed to have, so marshals come to her house and they execute her parents, and then they take her brother with them to a prison. So she basically sets out on this quest to find her brother. She joins up with the resistance groups of the scholars to fight against the marshals, and kind of there is this like romantic subplot where she meets this marshal boy, and there's a lot of deliberation about conflicting allegiances and like moral code and a moral compass, but it's really fun. It's also very like the fantasy elements are kind of like Middle Eastern inspired, like you get ifrits and wraiths and things like that, and it does take place in like a desert setting, so I thought that that was all really fun. And this tale gets super epic as the book series goes on, and you also get to follow 3 points of views, which my criticism of it is that some of the books, certain point of views are better. My problem was I accidentally made this mistake of overly identifying with Helene very soon. Like in the second book, I started seeing things from her perspective. You guys, if you read this book series from Helene's perspective, it is a little bit miserable. It's really fun, but like if you are in Helene's point of view, it's a little bit miserable. And I remember taking things so personally in this book series. My boyfriend had to sit me down and be like, you need to realize Helene is just one character, and I think you're supposed to be looking at this in like a grander scope, because I think you're taking things a little bit too personally and maybe you need to take a break. And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep reading. But he was right. Like I accidentally did take it too personally because I really love her character, because she's not necessarily a good person, but she's really interesting. And I just think that she is knocked down again and again. And it's like kind of hard to read after a certain amount of time. Anyways, I could probably go into extreme detail about every element where I think Helene was wronged, but she kind of deserved some of it, so like what can I say? Anyway, so I kind of came away with a bad feeling, especially in the third book, especially because like we did pick up characters along the way that were supposed to be really important that I felt like weren't that important at the end of the day in some of these instances. But overall, I really love this series. I highly rate it. I tell everyone to read it. I think it's like so fun. It's very gritty to the point where I'm really surprised this is in YA. I've read so many adult fantasy books, mostly written by men, like Tress of the Emerald Sea, which are in the adult fantasy section for some reason in bookstores in the US at least, which could classify as YA very easily, but you have Ember in the Ashes, which is classified as YA when it could very squarely be an adult fantasy. I feel like a lot of times, sometimes I read a book and I can kind of tell that the author didn't intend it to be a YA book, but it seems like publishers had pushed them into that age category for like marketing purposes. And this, I noticed this happens with like female authors a lot. And Ember in the Ashes was one of those where I have my suspicions where I'm like, I kind of feel like this wasn't intended to be YA. Because it's very gritty. It's very brittle. There's a lot of horrific like war violence that happens in this book that of course teens in that category are well equipped to handle, especially if they're like upper YA, like 17 or 18-year-olds. But like it could just be like adult. It doesn't impact my enjoyment of it at all, because either way the book series is that good. But I just like think about that so often when I'm reading this book series. I'm like, what was the thought process behind making this YA? It almost feels like sometimes they push women into YA because they think like, oh, no one's really gonna take this seriously unless it's teenage girls reading YA. I don't know, I could just be totally projecting, but I have read articles from authors and things like that where they do say that that is something that they are pressured to do very often. I just wanted to touch on that. Anyways, but overall, like, really great series. I really love it. It's really, really good. So I had a lot of fun with that. So that's like those three. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of loop them all in together. I also had a DNF this month, which was Square of Sevens, and I did touch on this recently in my tier ranking video. I am coming to the conclusion this year that, like, I love historical fantasy, but historical fiction, maybe I'm a little bit pickier about. So this takes place in like the Georgian era in the 1700s, and it's about this girl who doesn't really know much about her real mother, and she did have a father, but he unfortunately passed away when she was young, and so she was kind of like looked over by this like wealthy man who did treat her well, but she always felt like, and her dad came from like, or like, she just knows that her mother came from a very prestigious family, and they kind of withhold a lot of information from her about that. So she's kind of been like isolated from her extended family, but they're like very powerful people in London. I believe this takes place in London. She is kind of trying to uncover the secrets of like what happened to her mother, why is everyone being secretive about it. So it's very intriguing in that way, like there's a central mystery about it, but it's a very long book, like over 500 pages I believe, and I came to the conclusion that high society, like historical fiction books, maybe just not necessarily are my thing, because I tend to get kind of bored or winded by like people going over to each other's houses and talking a lot. And of course that's not just what this book was, and the writing style was very good. Like, it was well written, it was sophisticated, it was a good story. I just personally find for myself, I tend not to like when I pick up these high society historical fiction type books, because I just get bored. Or like, I haven't read enough of them to know which ones that I really like, but unfortunately this one just didn't keep me gripped. Like, every time I went to go pick it up, I was kind of like, I don't really feel attached to these characters. I don't really feel like I care enough to read the 500 pages to figure out this ending mystery kind of plot twist that apparently happens. But a lot of people really, really love this one. It's very highly rated on Goodreads, so obviously give it a go if any of that sounds interesting to you. I don't know, it just is one of those things. There's nothing wrong with it at all in the slightest. I just wasn't that interested in it, and so I DNF'd that one. Next was the Dead Cattail Assassins, and I did also talk about this too. This was another one where I think it wasn't quite for me as well, and another one where it is my fault. Like, it's nothing wrong with the book at all. This is like a novella type of story. It's like a fantasy world about this woman who is part of this crew called the Dead Cattail Assassins, and they are reanimated corpses essentially that carry out like assassin tasks. They're like an assassin crew, and the main character was really interesting, and she was like quite fun, and I liked her kind of voice in it. The thing about this book is it's really funny. Like, it's very, very heavy on the humor, and I don't think that the humor element was quite my style of humor. And I came to realize also while reading this book that I think that I like a certain degree of funny that doesn't kind of like overtake my enjoyment or like overtake my submersion into a story. So this is like a high fantasy world, and I will say, like, the world building in this, like the vividness of the setting and like these very imaginative set pieces that we get, and like just like there's like a festival that's described, and it feels like the culture of this world is also very, very rich, which is super fun for a very short novella because it's hard to pull that off. So I really, really loved that. Like, I loved that, and I craved more of that. But this is mostly just like kind of a fun action-packed like assassin tale. It was just really action forward, and I do like action, but not like super a lot. And it was also very like humorous, and also the sense of humor was pretty modern, but it was like kind of a high fantasy, a little bit historical feeling. It almost felt like, the way I was imagining it was like One Piece-esque, if that makes sense. So maybe it could fit for some people. I guess for me, I was a little bit like taken out by some of the jokes, but that's just my personal preference. I loved how I imagined this world though. Like I said, it kind of gave like One Piece live action to me. Like, it was almost like a cartoony but gritty setting, and I did really like it. So I think it's a good book, and I would give it a go. I don't think it was necessarily for me, so I don't think about it too much, but I know a lot of people who would really love something like this. So if you like really funny books and any of that sounds interesting to you, I would give this one a go as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. I just think that it just wasn't exactly my style. Love the world though. Next, I read The Will of the Many, and I got like the new cover, the new hardcover. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I do like this one more. I think this is cool, and I think that it kind of encapsulates, it's definitely like a high fantasy world, but there is kind of almost like a sci fantasy element to it as well. This is kind of like a political fantasy that takes place again in like a Roman almost inspired landscape, but there's like this ancient technology, which I love when we have ancient technology. I love ancient technology. That is so, like, it makes me so awe-inspired, so we do get a lot of that. And there's this boy named Viz, and he is kind of fending for himself. He like joins this fight ring to like stay alive and make money. Viz is an interesting character because it's insinuated that he kind of has this complicated past that we are not really privy to as the audience, but it will come up. And he has kind of a chosen one syndrome about him. Like, he is exceptional in very many ways. So he's basically scouted to join this like really rigorous, very prestigious school. Like, it's almost like a military school kind of program where like the best and brightest of this society, of these like heirs to all of these very prominent political figures, all of these Nepo babies, go to kind of prove themselves as like, go through the rankings at the class level, and then if they get like to the top, essentially they become like the top of the food chain. And in this world, like, it's kind of like a MLM pyramid scheme, essentially, because the magic system in this is by will, and people can essentially like sap their will to other people who are like higher status in their society. So the closer you are to the top, like the more will is being distributed to you through the lower tiers of people. So those people are like very magically powerful, let alone of course politically powerful as well. So it's a little bit like commentary about how like you're born into class systems that you can't break out of, and it's like the farce of a meritocracy. So I did really like that discussion in this book. So this is a very hype book, and I do think it lives up to the hype. I think I liked it less than everyone else did, but only because of all of the hype. I feel like if I read this independent of internet you know, internet thoughts like infiltrating my brain as I'm reading this book, I would have rated it higher. I just think that my expectations were set so high, especially about the ending like plot twist in this, which okay, hot take, I kind of feel like saying a book has a plot twist is a little bit spoilery in of itself, and so like that's what people focus on a lot. And also another thing is, I'm not the sort of person who relies on a good plot twist for me to like see, like I will not bump up a book's rating if the plot twist at the very end, like prologue plot twist, is that good. I want the whole book to be good. In this case, I thought the whole book was really good. The middle kind of lagged because I'm not like super into chosen one montage of getting ready to fight, kind of like building my skills kind of montage. I find it a little bit redundant and a little bit repetitive, and I felt like in those moments I wish, and we did get character interaction moments, so there's some interesting relationship dynamics that he has with some of the other students at the school, but I wish we built that out more. And I did think it was really fun, and I thought it was really imaginative, and I think that clearly like a lot of care went into the world building of this, and so I really respect this author for that. And yes, it was, and it was a good plot twist. It was. So I'm looking forward to reading the next one. I'm curious to see where we're gonna go from there. I think that a lot of things are gonna have to be very different, so I'm very excited about that. Next, I read The Winter of the Witch, which is the final book in the Winter Night trilogy. I love this trilogy so much. This book, like this series and then Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, give me this very distinct feeling of like enchantment. Like it feels, it's like a historical fantasy, which is a great genre, but it just feels very like rich. This world feels rich. This magic feels ancient and eternal. This one in particular felt very heavy on the folklore. I felt like the other, like I feel like the previous book was very heavy more on the historical elements of things, and the first book was also kind of folkloric, but it more felt like fairy tale. This one felt more folkloric, I think. So I really enjoyed it. I don't even have that much to say about it besides like all around it was quite good, and it was just like really, it was a strong ending, and I think very highly of this book series. I'm like very happy to have had the experience of reading this. So if you haven't read it by now, get into it. So that's The Winter of the Witch, and yeah, it was just beautiful book. Love it. Okay, the next one, and the reason why I'm kind of zooming through the others is because I think I'm gonna talk about this one for a long time. Okay, I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I went so back and forth about what rating I was gonna give this book, so like I'm reviewing my Goodreads because I have so many thoughts that are kind of all over the place that I need to kind of like sort. So like, this book is better than a lot of thriller books, I think, and the reason for that is I think that you can class this more of like a lit fic type book. Like this is a very character driven story. This is about this girl named Jessica, and she has become like super successful in her career. She works in finance, like you can tell like right off the bat she's very career driven, very status driven. Like she wants to look the best and be the best and prove herself to other people. Like that's very serious to her. And she's in her 30s now. She gets invited to her college reunion, and she went to this like very small, very prestigious, again, a very nepo baby academic small university in North Carolina, which I'm in right now. Goes back and forth between the timelines of her going to this reunion and revisiting these memories and tensions with her friend group from college. Something happened between this friend group, and we do know that someone was killed. And we don't know what went down, but we kind of uncover it through present day and the past. And we also kind of get to like dissect the dynamics between all of these different people and the secrets that they hold from each other. I guess I could summarize it like this. Everything that the author set up to do in this book is stuff that I freaking love, right? It's just that so hard for me to talk about this. It wasn't. It was almost like I think it took itself too seriously. I think that's what I would say. It took itself too seriously for how it actually executed things. Like it was explaining to me a lot, this relationship between these people, and how it's a lot of like, we had eternal summers. Like this summer is eternal. Like in that moment we were infinite. Like as they're like going to like a beach house in one of the summers or whatever. These very pointed vignettes that are like, don't feel like, ooh yeah, after everything I've read, I can feel the closeness between these people. It's like, okay, this author wants me to know that these people are close, but I don't think that she showed me it enough. Sorry, I'm on coffee, like a lot of coffee right now, and I'm kind of forgetting my thoughts on it, and I did write a bunch of notes after I finished the book, so I'm gonna kind of read off of this because I think this will be closer to how I felt at the time when I finished this. I said TikTokified imagery of dark academia. Yeah, it was very like TikTok-y idea of what dark academia would be, and I kind of feel like that's a misclassification because this book is actually like sorority and frat focused. Like all of the characters want to be in like the highest sororities, or they want to be in like the best frats, which I do like. I actually think more, I've said this, and I say this to a lot of people, we need more like Greek social culture centered stories, because just that atmosphere in general gives such a good basis for so many conflicts. It's just juicy and delicious. So I actually like that. I just think it's like a misclassification. It almost felt like, I don't know if this author knows that this isn't dark academia. This is like SRAT. This is like SRAT culture, not dark academia. Vignettes of a perfect preppy collegiate experience with a friend group where everyone is hot and incestuous. Yes, this is one of those books where like the friend group is very incestuous. You know those ones from like college or high school where you're like, why are they all dating each other? Or like, why are they all hooking up with each other? Just mess. And it does like, it takes that seriously, like the fact that they do that and they bounce around between each other is one of the conflicts. So I think that is really fun. I think through these vignettes of this relationship building between all of these friends and these summers that are like eternal summers was like explaining to me what it wants me to think about these people and what it wants this book to be, but it's not confidently embodying that vision like gradually over the course of the book to like make me feel like it's believable. It felt like these are characters acting as a group of people, as opposed to like, I didn't feel like they were really friends. Does that make sense? Like I didn't feel the closeness the way that I think I was supposed to. And they are kind of like fake with each other, and I get that, but I wish I saw more of like mundane parts of their relationships. Like to the point where it was like, I didn't buy into how much they romanticize one another in this book, because it has like a line in there was like, I think I was a little bit in love with all of them. Like, okay, Blue from the Raven Cycles, that's actually straight up a line pulled from that, I think. I don't know if that was intentional, but like with the Raven Cycle, I think you get so many more of those magical little moments of friendship, despite everything that goes on, that like it feels believable when she says something like this. To me, this was just like, okay, you want me to believe so bad that these characters are friends. And I was just unconvinced of those like very corny scenes of like oh, the sunroof was down and we were on the beach on the East Coast, and we had this eternal summer, and like, oh, the leaves were falling, and this like, and we're sitting at our table that we usually sit at, and like we're laughing and giggling, and like it felt like it was just made to be on a Pinterest board. Does that make sense? Like it felt like the author just like wanted to write a scene that like people would put on a Pinterest board, but it just didn't feel authentic to me. I don't know, I just kind of saw through it, I guess. Also the main character in this, like the character whose mind we're in, is a horrible person. And usually I actually really like that, and I say this a lot, I love really complicated characters where like our main character in particular is a bad person. Jessica is like deeply so evil to the point where I actively like was infuriated reading it, which is the point. So that's what I mean, like this author has a point and she's doing it. It's just that like it was actually legitimately hard for me to get through this time because I guess I have a really low tolerance for very male-centric characters and women, and she's so male-centric. It sucks. It's so hard to read like so many chapters of this in her point of view because oh my god, like you're just like, oh my god, is there any break from this character just putting her friends down so that she can look better to these boys who for some reason are obsessed with her. They are obsessed with her, they're in love with her, and we don't as the audience know why. Like there's no good explanation to the audience why these boys would be kind of obsessed with her in the way that they are. That's why it felt a little bit flimsy. It's like, I want at least to know some good things about Jessica, and it would make more sense why every single man in this group of friends is like wants her to jump her bones all the time, but we don't. So it was like a little bit infuriating. And then I kind of felt like, especially with the other women in the book, of course we got a lot of Jessica, but with the other women in their book, I really wish we expanded on those female friendships. I don't feel like we touched home enough about how male-centric Jessica is, because that is like a huge driving force, and I think that it is explained a lot by her relationship with her father, but I don't think that we like got to the point enough about like what she's doing to other girls really. It's like kind of touched on, and I did think that was really interesting, but I wish we talked more about how she treated the two other girls in this immediate friend group, because it's vile. Like it is vile, but it also could be a really poignant thing to touch on in a deeper way. And I kind of got the feeling like halfway through that this author might have gotten a little bit too wrapped up in like the romantic subplots, and it kind of starts feeling like a complicated romance book where it's like, ooh, we're kind of losing the purpose here. Like I kind of think this author wanted to write a really convincing love story at some point, but you just can't do it with a character like this when she's putting down women in the way that she is in order to get this male attention. It will not be believable to me, or like I will not root for it, you know what I mean? And it kind of felt like maybe the author got a little bit wrapped up in the sauciness of those relationships, whereas like I was over it because I'm like, I don't want to hear about this anymore because I'm so upset with this character and the way that she treats these other two girls. Again, it's kind of the point, it's just kind of frustrating. I feel so conflicted. Like I got what the author was trying to do, and I think that she did a lot of things, but there are points that were missed, and also how infuriating this main character is and how much she gets away with almost is exhausting. I don't even know how I'm gonna edit this. I think I'm just gonna leave this as like a full-blown rant, to be honest. Like I actually think that I will. I don't know how to edit this down because I feel so conflicted about this book. Okay, and the last thing that I wrote in my notes was, once you give your friend group a name, it's already over. Yeah, literally every group of friends that I ever knew who like called themselves a name, like the Fearsome Four, like the True Trio, like anything like that, which they call themselves something in this book, it's over. Like your friend group's over. Does that mean if I say that? Like to me, if you're giving your friend group a name, it's like you're trying to prove you're closest to other people through like titling it something, and it indicates to me that it's like kind of a facade, and it's a little bit like of an insecure group of friends who don't really like each other. Like naming your friend group is kind of like having a baby to make your relationship stronger. Like you think by giving it a title, it's gonna like prove to the world that you guys are like strong and you'll prove it to each other, but it doesn't actually work out. I kind of like things very quickly fall apart after that, and that was the point. So that is really fun because I do like examining friendships that are toxic. Like I think that that's one of my favorite dynamics to explore in a book, so I had a lot of fun with that. I just felt like it wasn't as self-possessed as I wanted it to be, and I felt like we got kind of lost with the romance subplots. I really liked the third to last scene of this book. I really hated the second to last scene of this book. I hated it. I got the point of it and I understood it, but I was infuriated by it, okay? And then the prologue, I really liked the prologue. I thought that was so good of a note to end on. So it was fun, like that was fun, and just I would liken it more to like a fun ABC style drama show as opposed to like a very super serious lit ficky book, I guess. But okay, all that said, obviously I have a lot of praises for it because I think that what it set out to do was really fun, and I really respect a lot of decisions that the author made, and the writing style is not bad by any means. And I'm looking forward to reading more of this author's work. I just kind of like, I'm hoping that the next main character is a little bit more redeemable, or if she's not gonna be a little bit more redeemable, she gets come down on a little bit harder so that I can feel better coming away from this book. So, yep. In my dreams, I hold a knife. That's that book. Next, I read Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This was really, really fun. It's like a vampire novel, but instead of it being super heavy on the vampire folklore, it's more of a, it's called a cyber noir because it takes place in this futuristic version of Mexico City that just, it's written like so vividly. Like you could feel how colorful it is and also how like grungy it is at the same time, because it's kind of like in this city that's been overtaken by, there's like cartel wars and things like that. But what's fun about this is like the cartel families, a lot of them are actually like powerful vampire families as well. So it has that element of like vampire family infighting and things like that. So it kind of feels almost like a mafia style noir book, but it follows two characters, one of them who is a vampire who is from this very prestigious vampire family but has since broken off due to something that went wrong in her family and is kind of trying to survive on her own, and then this boy who is a very, very kind-hearted, gentle guy, but he's like homeless at the minute, and they kind of come together and build a relationship. She's like super hot, but she's really, really rough around the edges. Like she's just like this piercing kind of personality, and he's this sort of like playful, fun, like he loves vampire movies. Like he's just kind of enamored by her from the start and like really wants her to like build her trust in him. And I thought that relationship was just really touching. And so for such a short book, this is like 200 something pages, I thought that we got a lot of really fun character work. And I also thought like, though it's not like the most complex, like kind of like gang fighting kind of story, like mystery story, because we don't have that much time, I thought like with the time that we did have, I felt entertained by the plot. I felt like the setting was vivid and I really liked these characters, and I thought that the relationship building between the two was successful. So overall, I just really like this book, and I would really recommend it if you're looking kind of for like a fun escape that's like not too long. Maybe it's like a palate cleanser type book, and especially if you like vampires, I would read that. That's Certain Dark Things. And then I was having a lot of political anxiety just around like American politics at the minute. So I decided to pick up Empire of Illusion by Chris Hedges. Yeah, why did I do that? Hey, why did I do that? I don't know. I think that I was kind of wanting someone to verbalize a lot of anxiety that I was having. I will say it did make it a little bit worse, but I do think like if you haven't read anything by Chris Hedges by now, I think now is the time. My thing about it is I just fear that the people who should read things like this are not the ones who are actually reading it, because this book was written like a decade ago, but he's heeding this warning about kind of this techno-oligarchy takeover that has been like being laid in the groundwork. And I think this was during the Obama administration that he was talking about, but he's like, I see something happening here. Like, we have to be very wary about the rhetoric that is about to come out. And I'm thinking a lot of these values that we have as a country are sadistic, and we claim to be a meritocracy, but we're really just moving in an oligarchy that is going to prey upon us in our attention spans and our anti-intellectualism, and they're gonna kind of break down our education systems, and they're gonna distract us with like the types of entertainment that we're gonna be fed. We're going to think that we're satisfied because we're distracted by our TV shows and our WWE wrestling and our pornography and everything like that, but really it's a reflection of our values as a country, and you always need to think critically about the media that you're consuming, because they're doing all of this to think that you're still happy and that you're entertained enough to not mobilize. But all of that messaging is still gonna show up in the media that you consume. So that's why it's called Empire of Illusion. It's this illusion of this like free world where we're having fun and our media is interesting and we're all kind of like participating in it and we all kind of have this equal say, but really it's all kind of manufactured for us to be blindsided by an inevitable fascist takeover. He kind of nailed it. Like he nailed exactly what was gonna happen. So it does feel very doomy, but his ultimate kind of thesis of it is like, we can overcome this. These chaotic entities that come into democracies and try to rip them apart, they don't last. They historically do not last. They fall. They always fall. And like, we can get through it, but it's gonna get harder before it gets better. It's a little bit disjointed because every single chapter like talks about a different part of our media or a different institution. So we'll go from like, well, by the way, chapter 2 is very, very, very visceral it's about pornography and misogyny. I would say skip it altogether. If you don't want to read explicit essay and explicit violence against women. He doesn't pull any punches when he's quoting from people who work in the industry and these young girls who have been groomed into this industry. I would skip it altogether if you didn't have a strong stomach, because even for me, I was like, I had to put it down. Like, it was really difficult to read. But the point of it is, like, we are kind of priming ourselves to be okay, like to be desensitized to the lack of empathy that we have for one another, especially the lack of empathy that we have for people that don't look like us, or women, or immigrants and things like that. Just to be very wary of that and to never let go of that like softness, and to not let yourself get desensitized to these things, because it's all instruments of fascism to make us okay very slowly with this treatment of others. It was a very poignant book. I wish that the people who need to read it would, but they won't, and that's the thing about it. But if you're interested in anything like that, I would highly recommend you go follow Chris Hedges on Twitter. He's super vocal still, and I do think that his insights are really, really important. The next book I read was The Berry Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is my first Kazuo Ishiguro. Oh my god, I think it's gonna stick with me for a long time. It's an Arthurian setting, so we do have tie-ins of like Sir Gawain and Merlin and Arthur, but it is about this old couple who live in this kind of like cave system and this like commune style place, and they are in love with each other. Like, they have this happy life with one another. He one day wakes up before her and is like, you know what, it's time. And what is it time for? Well, they want to go on a journey to see their son, who they haven't seen in a long time, and they can't really remember much about him or where he, or like what happened to him necessarily, because there is this mist that has been plaguing the entire continent, so that no one can remember anything for long periods of time. Sometimes certain visceral feelings come back up, but for the most part, everything is really peaceful because no one can remember any quarrels that they had at any given moment. They go on this journey to go visit their son, and in the meantime, they kind of pick up a couple stragglers along the way, and it kind of becomes this ensemble cast of like this unlikely group of people who there's like kind of episodic style quests that they go on, in a way, like little sidebar fun adventures and things like that. So it does have that kind of fun fantasy element to it, but overall this is more of a lit fic book. Like, don't go into it looking for extensive fantasy world building. I thought like the peculiar tie-ins of fantasy were kind of like, I really liked the weirdness of it. Like, there was something weird about it, and just like, because there's this fog that is plaguing everyone's memory, there is like this mystery of like what happened. Like, the ending of this, like, you get kind of wrapped up in the fun adventure quest Knight's Tale kind of thing, that you forget that there is this central mystery that is clearly very deeply embedded into society as a whole, and into the interpersonal relationship of this husband and wife duo. There's something very fragile like beneath the surface, and you kind of forget about that until the end just hits you like a truck. I was sobbing, crying. I have a photo of me crying after finishing it. Oh, I just thought, what a beautiful ending. What a beautiful allegory. I really, really, really liked this. I think it hit a lot of key elements that I like. The Arthurian tale, the aesthetic element of this peculiar type of fantasy world, and then this beautiful allegory at the end was just, it really, really, really worked for me. And I just really loved it. And I really highly recommend giving it a go. I kind of think like it might be kind of a slog at some points. Like, I can kind of see that being the case. So I wouldn't recommend it for literally everybody, especially if you're like one to get bored in like these sorts of Knight's Quest books a lot. But if you're like along for the journey of the book and you're like willing to kind of just like take everything as it is and just be intrigued in the central mystery, I highly recommend it. I just thought it was so beautiful. It was a really touching book, so I really enjoyed that. And anyway, sorry, I rambled way too long on this. This is a very rambly video. My thoughts are not as succinct as they usually are not, but especially not today. Anyway, those are my thoughts about the books I read in January. I think it was a pretty good reading month. I'm off to a great start. That's more than I read in January last year. So anyway, I will update you more when I've read more in the future. I want to emphasize, I want to read more romantasy this year. That's kind of surprising to a lot of people when I say that, because I haven't been a super big romantasy reader in the past, but my nervous system is getting, is gonna explode my brain pretty soon if I don't kind of read something that's a little bit more of an escapism thing. And I do think it's important to have your wits about you in a time like this and to critically think about everything you read. Of course, with Empire Evolution, it talks about that and everything like that. But at the same time, like, take care of your nervous system. It's very, very important that you take care of it. And if that means reading a palate cleanser book for once, go ahead and do it. You know what I mean? If once you read that, you're like, I want something a little bit denser, go ahead and do that too. Keep your wits about you, of course. Stay informed. But at the same time, I'm kind of at the point where I need something a little bit more fun. So probably in the month of February, I'm gonna be reading a lot more romantasy. Maybe I'll have a reading vlog about that. So stay tuned for that. I'm very, very excited. Anyway, so that was my wrap up. The sun is setting and I'm gonna head out. Bye.